All right. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good
We're
morning,
getting
Mr.
everything
Scott.
off. Mr. Scott, what is that? All right. So we are on part 4 of Moses this morning. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all of this today. This may be a two-parter. So did everybody get a handout?
No, because they were up there. There, up there.
All right. So a couple more.
I don't know. That's
Fine.
We are in vacation mode, let me just tell you.
Yeah, my office has been empty this week until Friday. A couple people dropped in unexpectedly, but it's like, woo, it's quiet. It's quiet in there.
Yeah,
All right. Well, this morning, as we go into continuing the character study on Moses, we've already covered God's protection and providence, and that was setting the stage for Moses's arrival. And then we got to see Moses and really what his motivation was. Moses was really a protector at heart. That's what motivated him. So whenever he saw somebody that was being oppressed, he was quick to jump in and try to remedy the situation. We saw that when he killed the Egyptian that was beating the Hebrew unjustly. And then we see it again when those shepherds came and rushed all of the girls that were trying to get water at the well. So he is a protector at heart. And then we talked about his preparation and his isolation. As he was in Midian, remember, he was in the desert. He's used to the city. He ran away to Midian, and now he is as rural as you can get. And he sits by the well. And what did I tell you about that well? Social spot. That's the social spot. So he knew if he came there, then he would get an idea of what to do next.
I thought that was the well was mostly for women, though.
It is mostly for women.
Okay.
But this is a Bedouin refuge. So it's nomads that are coming through to water their flocks.
Okay.
And so we'll see men there too. So usually in a residential area, it's the women that'll go to the well to draw the water for their homes for that day.
Okay.
Okay. So we see here at this point that Moses meets a family. The family takes him in, and scripture tells us that he settles there. Okay. He's planning on staying there for the long haul.
Settles with the woman he met at the well?
Well, one of them, because there were 7 sisters that came to the well to draw for the flocks.
You only had to choose from 5.
Chose the best.
Yeah.
All right. So when Moses arrives in Midian, he stands up and once again helps with some in time of need. So Exodus chapter 2, verses 16 and 17 tells us of how Moses helps the priest of Midian's 7 daughters. The Bible goes on to tell us that Moses was perceived as an Egyptian. He was recognized. So there was a couple of things there. First of all, it's the priest of Midian. So what does that tell us?
The priest?
This is a religious family.
Okay.
That he's going. And we'll see in a little bit that this is a Jewish priest. Okay. So he's basically he's back to his roots. Remember, his first 5 years, he was raised Jewish. Then he went to the Egyptian schools.
How much he remembers, though.
That's going to be a point today.
Okay.
Okay. So perhaps Moses still looked like an Egyptian. Moses may have spoken like an Egyptian, picked up the Egyptian accent, right? Whatever the case, he appeared to be an Egyptian, and maybe this is based on Moses's testimony of being born in Egypt, but of Hebrew parents. Because they probably asked him, who are you, where you're from, tell me your life story. Okay, so when people see you, do they recognize you as being foreigners to this world? Because if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, scripture tells you that you are a foreigner in this land. So this is just a temporary holding spot for us, but our permanent dwelling place is going to be with the Lord in heaven. So this is a short time. You are supposed to look like a stranger here. So if you fit in with the rest of the world, you're doing something wrong. Okay. Now, it's in the following passages in Exodus 3 and Exodus 4 that Moses is going to encounter God in a very special and very personal way. Now, no doubt his parents had taught him much about God during his first 5 or 6 years, but one must experience an encounter with God personally. This passage is the root passage for probably one of the most influential Bible studies that I've ever gone through personally. It's a study put together by Henry Blackaby called Experiencing God. And that really has guided my personal life more than any other Bible study I've ever done. And the idea basically is this: you don't have to invent something to do for God. God is already doing it. You need to join him in the work that he's already begun. It's kind of like a team that's already winning, and they've asked you to be part of the winning team. That's the easiest situation.
Don't try to invent a winning team.
Now, if you're like Wimby and being called into a team that's been losing, now that's a lot of pressure.
For a
God doesn't
19-year-old.
put that pressure on us. Like Henry Blackaby, and it's called Experiencing God.
Dude, we did that in the 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, that was in the early 90s.
Yeah, it's in depth.
Fantastic study.
Yeah, it is really.
And it's all based on this. God has already set the stage. He's already moved all of the pieces where they need to be. And now it's time to bring the most powerful piece into play. That's Moses. He didn't know it yet, but God had already put everything in place.
This always reminds me, when you said that, the parents taught him so much between his first 5 or 6 years, that train up the child in the way he should go.
Exactly right.
And when he is old, he won't depart from it.
Because it's usually in our time of troubles that we sit down and we say, oh, what am I supposed to do? Oh, I remember when my mom told me that.
Mhm.
And you pull something in from way, way back. Because during those formative years in your mind, that stuff sticks.
It does.
A child's mind is really absorbent. And it's going to pick up all of the good and all of the bad that you do.
Right.
So fill that child's mind with good. So Moses in Exodus 2, verse 21, marries Zipporah. That's Reuel. Sometimes it's called Jethro's daughter. So sometimes his name is Reuel. Sometimes it's Jethro. Sometimes it's Hobab. So Reuel is his given name. That's the name his parents gave him. And that name means, well, it ends in L. So what does that tell you?
Son of Reu.
No, L means of God. Okay. That's why all the archangels, Michael and Gabriel, it's always of God. So in this case, Reuel means friend of God. Okay. So that was the name his parents gave him. Jethro is a Hebrew word also, but it's a title. It means his excellence. Well, why would he be given the name his excellence?
Because he's
He
well-respected,
is
high.
the priest of Midian, not of a little town.
Midian is the
He is the whole region. That's the Sinai Peninsula. Okay. He is the guy. So Jethro is his title. Hobab actually is a brother to the 7 sisters. We see him picking up his father's mantle later on. So we see that the Bible tells us that he was content to dwell with the man. So Moses attached himself to the dude, Reuel. I want to be part of your household. I will help you in any way you need help. You don't have any young guys to help here, so I'm your guy. And he's 40. Remember, that's young in those days. Okay. So Moses, in his own way, comments upon his present circumstances. Verse 21, Moses accepted the invitation and settled there with him. And in time, Reuel gave Moses his daughter Zipporah to be his wife. Later, she gave birth to a son. Moses named him Gershom, for he explained, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. So what does this tell you about Moses's mindset? Even though he was Hebrew as a child, he still sees himself as an Egyptian. because that's where he got all of his schooling, and he doesn't fit in with the Jews that have been raised Jewish all of their
And
lives.
plus, I'm sure they don't treat him.
Yeah, we don't see that, but it could be.
But you know, the human nature, you don't.
Yeah,
somebody's
they could
different.
probably still see him as a foreigner.
Yeah,
I've been here for 40 years and I'm still a Yankee. So yeah,
because you don't have an accent,
is that what it is?
an accent.
All right, so let's jump into this. This is chapter 3 of Exodus. So the first thing we need to talk about is the place. Okay, so one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. Remember,
Father-in-law.
that's a different place. So father-in-law Jethro, that's his excellency, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. So what's the deal about taking the flock to a far away place? This is desert. How
So
much
they're-
grazing pasture is there?
Okay, you have to find.
Not
somewhere to
much.
eat.
You got to take the sheep a long way away to find something for the sheep to eat. So they take, like nomads, they take the flocks and just go where they can find something for the flocks to eat and drink.
So why would they raise sheep if there's no grass to eat?
Free land, and then a lot of it.
I mean, raise camels.
Okay, so the wilderness of Sinai. So Webster's dictionary calls the wilderness an arid land, usually with sparse vegetation. Okay, and it's a desolate or forbidding place. The King James Version, I love it how it describes it as being the backside of the desert. That's like when we say the armpit of the world.
Look at that.
Okay, so King James calls this the backside of the desert. It's the desert's
The
butt.
backside of
That's
the
where
desert.
Moses ends up at this point. So desert is bad enough. The backside, I can't even imagine.
That's hilarious.
But this is where Moses finds himself. So this is a picture of the wilderness of Sinai. There's not much to eat there.
Looks like Mars.
Okay, it's a lot of desert with some scrub growing up here and there, some tufted grass. Okay, so where did Jesus go after he was baptized and before he started his ministry?
Wilderness.
The wilderness. Where did Paul go after his encounter with Jesus and before he started his ministry?
Wilderness.
The wilderness. So now where does Moses find himself?
The wilderness.
Do you see a theme?
Through an encounter.
So after an encounter with God, he's going to take you into a barren place.
The backside.
Now, it may not be literally, but when you have a mountaintop experience with God, what's going to follow?
Valley.
The backside of the desert. Okay, that's where God's going to take you, because in that time you're going to have a crisis of belief. Again, this is part of Henry Blackaby's story. You're going to have a crisis of belief, and you're going to reach back to that mountaintop experience, and you're going to ask, was that real? Did that change my life? And then you're going to come out of that valley and you're going to be ready for action. If that mountaintop experience was just a flash in the pan, then that valley experience is going to make that fade away. That's a test right before ministry.
Look at you, Blake.
Exactly right, Blake. Exactly right. So, John Bunyan in the mid 1600s, he was a pastor in Bedford, England. And during his time as pastor, he was considered a dissenter because he was not ordained by the Church of England. Remember, this is the time of Henry VIII. He broke off of the Catholic Church, formed his own church. But John Bunyan is like, no, we need to stick with Bible. So he's going to be one of those Protestants, okay? Bunyan was arrested for preaching without a license, and he was imprisoned for 8 years. That sounds like a valley. He was then released in 1666, and he immediately began preaching again. After just a few short weeks, he was incarcerated again, but it was there in his lonely jail cell that Bunyan wrote the book, Pilgrim's Progress. Okay, that is a classic Christian book, The Pilgrim's Progress. So that's another one that you should probably add to your reading list. Okay, so Sinai is called the Mountain of God. It's not the tallest mountain in the area, but there must be some reason that God picked this place. Mount Sinai sometimes is called Mount Horeb.
I was gonna ask.
It's the same mountain. Okay, it's the same mountain, just different names. Kind of like the Sea of Galilee is also called another name, but it's the name of the Caesar. So I can't remember what it is, but you get different names for places in geography, depending on who's in control at the time. Okay, so verse 1b says that he led the flock and came to Sinai. So like I said, it's not the tallest mountain. It's only 7,500 feet. Okay, that's just a little bit higher than Denver. Okay, it is mountainous, but it's not like.
Well, it's not
like Everest or something. I
I was
mean,
gonna say the one.
okay, it's not the biggest mountain in the world.
It does not look hospitable.
No. So according to Webster's, a mountain is a large mass of earth and rock rising above the common level of the earth or adjacent land, but no definite altitude. So it could be a flat place and that's just 1,000 feet. That's still going to be a mountain by definition.
Okay.
Okay. So the mountain of God is described as being approached from the backside of the desert. Moses' encounter with God would be here in this far off, desolate, lofty place. Okay. Now, why did God choose a mountain?
Well, he's about to have a mountaintop experience.
But that is the name that it was given after the event. So why did God choose a mountain?
Because you're alone? Because, no.
Well, it's because he's God.
Oh,
Okay. Where is God's home?
Yes,
In the highest of the highs.
I see.
Okay. So scripture tells us in Psalm 116:2 that God bends down to listen. Because he's in the highest of highs. He is high and lifted up, but he did come down to earth, not all the way down
To earth,
to the dirt.
because.
Okay.
Yeah.
He just came kind of
because
down.
us.
Physically reason. He didn't want to bend over too.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-uh.
Yeah.
I like
So
that.
a more earthly reason, God needed his people. Remember, this is later in the show. God needed his people away from other nations until they could be established as their own. There is no Hebrew nation yet. Remember, it all started with Jacob and Joseph and his 11 brothers. It's not a nation yet. It had never been a nation yet. It's just a bunch of nomads in the desert. But God knows what he has in store for these people, that they are going to be a nation. So God needs to form them into this nation that he wants them to be. And he doesn't want them pressured by other nations or bothered by other nations. I mean, if an army is going by and sees 1 million people, whoop, that's a threat, going to wipe them out. Well, let's take them away from everybody so that won't happen either. Okay, so that's why we're out here. After they were established, they needed room to spread out the way God intended. More on that later. Be fruitful and multiply, go out into the world. That's the plan that God had for everybody from the beginning. So notice some interesting things in verse 2. Somebody read verse 2.
There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up.
All right, so what do you see here? Anybody who's been taught by me for any length of time, Jesus appeared to him. That's right. Man, you are on point today. It says, the angel of the Lord. Remember, anytime that you see the angel instead of an angel of the Lord, this is called a Christophany. Okay? Christophany is a fancy word for the appearance of Christ before the manger. Okay? The angel of the Lord. Jesus appeared to him in a blazing fire in the middle of a bush. Now that makes sense because scripture tells us No one can look upon the face of God and live. So if God appeared to Moses, Moses would be dead. So Jesus appears to Moses. And then Moses stares in amazement because he knows science. And he knows when something's burning, it's supposed to be consumed. And so his scientific mind is like, I need to step closer to this. I need to figure out what's going on. And as he does, God says, don't step any further. This is a holy place. Take off your shoes. Okay. So one day Moses was tending the flock. He sees this burning bush, didn't burn up. And Moses says, why isn't that bush burning? I have to go see it. When the Lord saw Moses, you catch that? The Lord?
Yeah.
Right? When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Now we've got two parts of the Trinity that's
Angel
present here.
It's still standing there.
Yep, the angel of the Lord is still appearing to Moses from within the bush as a blazing fire. So this is the judgment Jesus. This is the same judgment Jesus that we see in Revelation. Okay. And now God is calling out to him. Moses. Anytime you see God speaking to people in the Old Testament, it's weird. He always says their name twice.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Mhm.
So Moses, what? Moses. Oh, I got you. Okay. This makes them focus right in. So now Moses is got a bearing on God at this point. So God's appearance to Moses, God calls out to Moses, and there's two amazing facts that surround this event. First of all, God meets us where we are. We don't have to be good enough to reach God. God reaches down to us in whatever condition we're in. This is how sinners get saved. Okay? God reaches down to the sinner. The second thing is that God desires to commune with us and use us for his glory. God could do it all himself. He's got the ability. He chooses not to. He chooses to use people to do his work. And so that's exactly what's going on here. So this call was personal. He used his name, Moses. So God wasn't looking for just anyone. He was looking for Moses. So I went and actually was watching clips out of the Ten Commandments movie, and I was trying to find the point where God calls out to him, Moses, but he doesn't do that in the movie. So I just put my own little subscript there, Moses. My own subtitles on the movie.
There you go.
So John 3:16 says that God so loved what? The world, but when he calls us, he doesn't say, hey, you're part of the world. Come on.
World.
He calls us by name, where we are, wherever we are in our life at that point. It is a personal call, and it still is today. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. God saved who? You. By his grace. When who? You believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things that we have done. So none of us can boast about it. Well, God saved me. No. There's no boasting in that. Okay? It's God. He's the main player. And he rescued those who would believe in him. Okay? Individually. Now, God commanded Moses in verse 5, do not come any closer. The Lord warned, take off your sandals, for you're standing on holy ground. Now, was that piece of real estate specifically holy?
No.
What made it holy?
Because
God was there. So it's God's presence that makes that place like no other place. And that's the definition of holy. It's made different now because of the presence of God. And God calls us to be holy. Well, how do we get to do that?
By listening.
By God indwelling us. Because when God indwells us, he's here, and it's his presence that makes a place holy. So God's presence makes us holy. Okay, now we got to obey. That comes later. So God lovingly shows us the way that we ought to go. So remember way back, it wasn't God who left man. Adam and Eve left God. And because of their sin, they broke communion with God. And so God now is coming into the garden, and he's like, wait a minute. They're usually right here because they're always with me. But now they're not right here. I need to remind them of that. Oh, Adam, where are you, Adam? It's not that God didn't know. It's God wanted Adam to feel bad about what he had done.
And they did.
And they did. They were truly remorseful. So man left God. So God communed with Moses in this place. Okay. Now, what does that word commune mean? It's a fancy word.
I don't know, we always take it as like eating or
They chillaxed.
okay.
That's what happened. And we don't get all of the details of what happened
Yeah.
at this point, but basically it says that they communed with each other. So there was some time here that there was conversation back and forth. We don't know those details, but that's what's included in this commune.
So you're
Together.
saying Moses was relaxed,
He was.
and I don't see how that.
After the initial
freaked
shock,
me out.
yeah, after the initial shock. So in verses 6-9, God introduces himself to Moses. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Why?
Because he's
No one can look at God,
yeah, well,
right? So he's like, wait, I'm not supposed to look at you. Okay.
right.
And the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt, and I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt onto their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. So Moses knows exactly
Where this is.
where they're supposed to be going, where God is going to lead his people to. Okay. So look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abused them. So God lays out the plan here, but there's a character missing. Moses.
Well, he's talking to Moses.
But who's going to be doing the work according to what God said? No.
Oh,
God says, I have heard, I have come down, I have come to rescue them, I have come to lead them. Now he's laying down some groundwork here that's going to be very important. So who's doing the heavy lifting?
God.
God is. And God tried to make that clear to Moses, but Moses, in his smartness, is pretty dense to what God is actually saying at this point.
I knew there were some people living in that land. I didn't know it was all
Oh,
those
there's
people.
lots of people. Yeah, all those ites.
Mhm.
So God sovereignly chooses to commune with man. He could have just programmed us to do his will.
Mhm.
But in every case, he calls us to do his will. And then he guides us in what we're supposed to do. So the problem is, we being dumb, we may hear God's call and we say, okay, I can do it. And we jump out ahead of God and we're trying to do all this stuff for God and we fail. Why?
Because
Oh, I forgot.
You forgot God.
God, you're supposed to lead me in this. Okay. So God then tells us, go here, do this. And then we're supposed to sit and wait. And then calls us to do this step. And we do it. And then we're supposed to wait. But we forget about that listening part, especially those of us like me who are doers. And we jump in and just do. And then all of a sudden we're doing it in our strength and we're not doing it in God's strength. And then because it's in our strength, we tend to fail. Okay, so Moses' approach to God, things shift at this part. So Moses was tending his flocks. He turns aside to see what God did. He answered the call, Moses, and he said, here I am. Now, this doesn't mean, oh, wait, in case you didn't see me, he's saying at your service. That's what he's saying at this point, because that's the polite thing to do. When someone calls you, you're supposed to say at your service. Okay, so he's doing the polite thing. And then Moses was afraid, and he hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So in Acts chapter 7, verses 31 and 32, it says, when Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight. As he went to take a closer look, the voice of the Lord called out to him, I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses shook with terror and did not dare to look. So, have we gotten too comfortable with God? I think so. In the 60s, we're all products of that, even though we don't realize it. In the 60s, the fire and brimstone preaching that was so common faded away. And it was replaced with what was called the Jesus movement. Jesus wants to be my friend. There's a song called Jesus is a Friend of Mine. Really annoying, but it's kind of a flower child ballad. Okay. And it's this idea of, Jesus Christ superstar. And he's just this down to earth guy that we can just, sit and rap with. Yeah, smoke the peace pipe with.
That is true, but it's also true of the judgment. It's also true of and we forget. We just take one side of a multifaceted person.
Exactly. And so we're too comfortable with God instead of realizing, God does have the right to smite us. One of my favorite cartoons from the Far Side is God. It's called God at his computer.
Yeah.
And he's looking at this doofus walking, and there's a piano hanging over his head, and God's finger is hovering over the smite button. It says smite. That's one of my favorite cartoons. But we're too comfortable with God, and we forget he brought us into this world and he can take us out. It's not your mama, regardless of what she said. Okay.
But I think we should be so reverent with God, but comfortable with Jesus.
Yes. And Jesus allows us to be comfortable, to approach God as Abba, Father, Daddy. Before that, this was a God to be feared only.
That's hard to wrap your brain around.
It is. It is. So the proper way to approach God is with humility. And that's basically, I know a rattlesnake can kill me. So I don't just walk up to the rattlesnake and say, oh, pet the rattlesnake. Okay, you have to walk up to it with respect.
Or don't walk up to it.
And there's a certain way that you're supposed to approach it. Okay? There's no redeeming qualities in a rattlesnake. So usually when we see them, we back away. Okay? But let's say bees. Bees have very important things to do. And the honey is really yummy. But you still have to respect the hive when you walk up to it. Or you're going to get stung. Right? What, Monica? So that's this respect and humility. Now, Proverbs 3:34 says, the Lord mocks the mockers, but's gracious to the humble. Okay. James 4:6, and he gives grace generously, as the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's how we're supposed to approach God. James 4:10, humble yourself before the Lord and he will lift you up in honor. We see this with the apostles fighting over who gets to sit at Jesus'
Yes.
right hand.
Yeah.
And Jesus chastises them and says, none of you until I call you. Okay?
None yet.
None yet. All right. So God sees the affliction. Remember, Moses found himself leaving Egypt because of the killing of an Egyptian, because of the killing of an Egyptian after seeing the affliction of the people. He saw the affliction, he killed the afflictor, and then he says, I'm out. The Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering. So Moses is being called back by God to that point in time that stirred up Moses's passion in the first place. And so at this point, God's saying, I'm with you. I'm right here. I see the same thing you see. There's the communion that's going on. They're starting now in the same place. This God of the Old Testament is still doing the same thing today. Look at Hebrews 4:15. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings we do, yet did not sin. So just like God told Moses, I see this oppression. I know what drove you to do what you did. Well, in the New Testament, we're told the same thing. Jesus Christ knows our sufferings. He knows our trials because he experienced them himself. He knows what we're going through. Okay? God came to deliver, verse 8. So I have come down to rescue from the power of Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. So it's full of people. Okay? The King James uses a different verb for lead. It uses the word bring. It tells us that Moses isn't doing the leading. God's going to be there every step of the way. But Moses missed it. He didn't understand this when God was giving him his task. There's no chance that they can get lost unless they don't follow. Surely that won't happen. Well, we know they end up 40 years instead of 3 months. It should have taken them 3 months on foot to get there, no more than 3 months. But because of them taking their eyes off of God, 40 years, they wandered in circles because God was leading them, but they didn't follow. Okay? It says Moses would be the instrument. I got to fill in the blank for you here. God's plan most always involves man. If you are a child of God, you will be called upon by God for a task. It just comes with it. Okay? Exodus 3:10, now go. For I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. Wait a minute. God just said, I will bring them, but you will lead them. What does this mean? It's subtle, but what does it mean?
God is going to do it, but he's giving you the stuff to do it with.
Yeah. So God is going to give Moses everything he needs. The direction, the power, everything. God's going to bring the people out of Egypt and bring them to the point to follow Moses. And Moses is going to step out in faith first, following God, and the rest of the people are going to follow him. That's how it's supposed to work. But everything gets all wonky. And it's all because of Moses, not the people. Because of this call, Moses became a sent one. Okay. The Greek word for this is apostolos, which is in English, apostle.
Apostle.
Okay. So that's what the word means. The word apostle means sent one. So Jesus sent the apostles. So when he gives us a task, he sends us to do it, which makes us a sent one, which makes us apostles. Pretty cool. What is the answer to Moses' question in verse 11? Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Notice Moses' first excuse is based on authority. Who am I? I'm just a shepherd. That's what he's doing. I'm just a shepherd out here in the desert. Who am I to go talk to this Pharaoh?
How long was he there before this happened?
40 years. So he was 40 when he killed the Egyptian.
So he had 40 years
And then
in
he
Egypt,
spent 40 years in
and then
Midian
40 years in Midian.
before he went back.
Huh.
So Moses would be the instrument. God didn't bother to elevate Moses. His answer in verse 12 says, I will be with you. I already told you this. I am going to do the work. I just need you there. Okay. So I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you'll worship God at this very mountain. So it was supposed to be an easy plan. God says, go get the people and just bring them here. That's all I'm asking you to do. I'm going to do everything for you. And that's how easy it was supposed to be. And Moses' answer at this point was, yes, sir, I'm on my way. No. Now we've got a whole day of bickering and bartering going on. Watch this. Moses' next objection is still based on his position, but also it's based on his Egyptian experience. If I go to the people of Israel and I tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they're going to ask me, oh yeah? Well, what's his name? You're an Egyptian. So what are you doing telling me that our God is calling us? So what am I supposed to tell them? So now this is Moses now saying, wait, you got the wrong guy. I'm Egyptian. I can't go talk to them. First of all, it's like, I'm a Jew. I can't talk to Pharaoh. And now it's, oh, I'm an Egyptian. I can't talk to the Jews.
Yeah.
Well, this is just ludicrous what's going on. So basically, the Hebrews didn't listen to him before. That's why he left. I'm here to save you from your Egyptian oppressors. What are you going to do? You're going to kill us too? And so that's why he left. The Egyptian gods, whom the Hebrews all knew, all had names. So now this is his Egyptian experience coming in. So if they ask me, what's your name? You have a name too, right? What am I supposed to do? Up until this point, God never gave himself a name. He said, I am the God of Abraham.
He never called himself Yahweh?
Nope.
Really?
Of Isaac and of Jacob. He never gave himself a name prior to this point. And it's only because Moses pressed that God gave him a name. God's answer is more cool than you realize. So verse 14, God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. Well, that's kind of weird in English, you know, it's kind of like, I am what I am.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Popeye's coming to talk to me.
Yeah.
But in Hebrew, it means something completely different. And this is what God told Moses. It's really a complex statement, and it doesn't come across in English very well. It comes across very Popeye.
Mhm.
in English. But in this sentence, he is saying, I was who I was in eternity past. I am who I am, and I will be who I will be in eternity future. So this is more than I am. He is giving the whole thing what I am before the universe. I created the universe, and now I am in this universe with you. And long after this passes away, I still will be. That's what he's saying in this word. And at this point, Moses's brain must have blew up, because that's huge. That's much bigger than any Egyptian god. And this is new
But
to
he was
Moses.
uniquely able to understand that.
He was. God created him to understand this.
Yeah.
Okay. So Moses at this point is trying to wrap his mind around this, kind of like we try to wrap our mind around a science fiction show that uses time travel. Like it just kind of melts your brain just a little bit trying to understand it. But this is echoed in Hebrews 13:8, where it says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
That I can understand better.
Okay. But it's the same thing.
I know.
Okay. It means the same thing. So God continues now by actually giving his name. This is the first time. And this is his personal name. It's not a title. It's not a description of what he does. This is like, my name is Joe. Okay. This is his personal name. Verse 15, God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations.
Wow.
Okay, so this is the first time. So the original Hebrew word, okay, it's Hebrew, it's written from right to left as you read it. Okay,
That's cool
so
looking.
the letters here are YHVH. If we go letter by letter,
Yeah.
which is the letters Yod, He, Wah, He. Okay, and if you put it together, it's Yehovah, which in English, Jehovah. Okay,
Jehovah.
so
Yeah.
that is God's given name, Jehovah. And the Hebrews understand this. And this is the name they will never say out loud.
True.
They will never speak God's name because
Or even write it.
or even write it. When they even write God,
Yeah.
G-O-D, they leave out the middle letter. They leave out the O. Capital G, little blank D, because their hands are too dirty to dishonor the name of God. Their tongue is too dirty to dishonor the name of God.
Mhm.
They won't even speak it. Okay? God's personal name, Jehovah.
What if they've been cleansed by the blood of Jesus?
They
Yes,
forget
I
that
will.
part. Okay? So now Moses tries to excuse himself based on acceptance. But Moses protested again.
No.
This is Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? You're just lying to trick us. So this is his argument now. God already answered this back in chapter 3. The elders of Israel will accept your message.
Oh.
God's working in their minds also, is what he's saying. The elders of Israel will accept your message. Then you and the elders must go to the king and tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. The Lord, this is Yahweh,
Yeah.
Jehovah. Okay. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. So from Egypt to Sinai is 3 days on foot.
So God is saying, so please let us take a 3-day journey.
God is basically giving Moses the script.
Okay.
Go to the elders, tell them this, then go to Pharaoh, tell him this, and then just come. That's how easy it was supposed to be.
Boy, that's
But
nice.
now, as God is setting the plan, we know what we know happened. We watched the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston,
Mhm.
and we're like, wait, that's not what happened. That's not how it goes. And it's all because of Moses. And he's laying down the framework right here of screwing everything up. So apparently this answer wasn't good enough for Moses. God already told him. So God now is changing tack. You dense person, let's try this a different way, God says. So then the Lord asked him, what's that in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down on the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. That's not where you grab a snake. Okay? Grab its tail. So Moses reached out, grabbed it, and it turned back into the shepherd's staff in his hand. Perform this sign, the Lord told him. Then they'll believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, really has appeared to you. Now, who was he supposed to show this sign to?
The Hebrews.
The elders of the Hebrews and the Hebrews. But who did he show this sign to?
The Egyptians.
The Egyptians. And Pharaoh says, oh,
Do that.
I can do that. And he had his magicians do the same thing. Moses is not obeying. All the way from the beginning, Moses is not obeying. You're not paying attention, Moses. So Moses tried to excuse himself based on acceptance. Then the Lord said to Moses, now put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses puts his hand inside of his cloak, and when he took it out again, his hand was white as snow with a severe skin disease. Now put your hand back in your cloak, the Lord said. So Moses put his hand back in, and when he took it out again, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. Okay? The Lord said to Moses, if they do not believe you are not convinced, if they do not believe you and are not convinced by the first miraculous sign, they will be convinced by the second sign. And if they don't believe you or listen to you even after these two signs, then take some water from the Nile River and pour it out on the dry ground. When you do, the river from the Nile will turn to blood on the ground. Okay, so God has given him three things.
It sounds like a plague.
Okay, so later it's one of the plagues. So he said, show now that I can control living things.
Mhm,
Show now that I can control your health,
mhm.
and show now that I can control nature.
Yeah.
Okay. But Moses pleaded with the Lord. Oh, Lord, I'm not very good with words. Lies. I never have been. Lies. And I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. Okay. What did we read in Acts 7:22?
Mm.
Read it. Acts 7:22.
It says, Moses was taught all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was powerful in both speech and action.
Wow. So Moses is powerful of speech. So in front of God, he's saying, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now.
Oh, no.
So, all right, let's give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. All right. So what happened during the last 40 years? So he was powerful in the ways of Egypt up until he was 40.
Mhm.
Well, now he's left Egypt. And who has he spoken to for 40 years? Sheep.
Oh, I was about to say Hebrews.
So he's been out in the wilderness just speaking to sheep. Now, sheep don't understand Hebrew. Sheep don't understand Egyptian. All right. So what language did Hobab and Jethro and his 7 daughters speak? Aramaic. Okay, check it out. Since coming to Midian, the language that he's speaking is the language of the descendants of Abraham and his wife Keturah. That would be Aramaic. So in Midian, he comes there to speak Egyptian, maybe some Hebrew. Well, Hebrew's church language. We speak Aramaic.
So he knows 3 languages.
So he knew more than 3 languages.
Okay, so
So now, for 40 years, he's been speaking Aramaic. What happens to your language skills if you don't speak them for 40 years?
they're kind of rusty.
They get kind of rusty. So let's give him a benefit of the doubt. He's been speaking Aramaic for 40 years, so his Hebrew is going to be rough. Yeah. And his Egyptian is probably going to be pretty rough. I mean, I learned German in college, but the amount of German that I remember now is pretty slim. You lose it if you don't use it. Moses trying to excuse himself here. He's only speaking Aramaic. His other languages are going to be rusty. So yeah, he probably is pretty rough when he's trying to speak Egyptian and Hebrew after 40 years. So when he says that he wasn't very good with words, he's referring to Hebrew. He never was good at Hebrew because that's a language of slaves. He's not the slave driver. He's the head of commerce for Egypt. Okay? So the phrase translated as tongue-tied in scripture, it's actually heavy-tongued, which equates to difficulty with a foreign language. So he's heavy-tongued when it comes to Hebrew. He doesn't speak Hebrew well. And God is asking him to talk to the Hebrews, talk to the elders, show the elders these signs. And he's like, I can't speak that language very well. So Moses's problem wasn't a speech problem. It really is a self-confidence problem. Because he's like, I don't want to. I'm not Egyptian. Oh, wait. I'm not Hebrew. Oh, wait. Who are you? What am I going to say? I don't even know how to speak the language.
He started freaking out when he
Okay,
gets there.
he is. He's totally freaking out because he's simple being a shepherd.
Yeah.
I have no responsibilities. I'm not in charge of anything except these sheep, and they pretty much just go where they want to. That's what he's been doing for 40 years. He doesn't want the responsibility. He doesn't want to do this job. Verse 11, then the Lord calls to Moses and says, who makes a person's mouth? Well, the answer, God. Who decides whether people speak or do not speak? God. Or hear or do not hear? God. See or do not see? It is I, the Lord. Okay? So God is saying all of these excuses you're giving, they're lame. I'm the one that's giving you everything. So just follow me. That's all I'm asking you to do. Moses didn't need self-confidence. He needed God confidence. God already laid it out. I'm leading them. I will bring them. I will give you the words to say. I will give you the miracles to do. God has already laid it all out. And God wasn't taking any excuses. So in verse 12, God just says, now go. Go. I will be with you as you speak. I will instruct you in what to say. So don't be afraid. I'll do everything for you. And what happens? Moses ran out of excuses. And so now he just whines. Please, Lord, send anyone else but me. That's what he's doing at this point. Wah. You didn't believe any of my excuses. So just send someone else. And verse 14 says, and the Lord became angry at Moses. Now, God was not angry when Moses asked, who am I to go to these people? He wasn't angry with Moses when he said, who should I say sent me? He wasn't angry with Moses when Moses disbelieved God's word and said, suppose they won't believe me or listen to my voice. He wasn't even angry when Moses falsely claims that he was not or never had been eloquent. But God was angry when Moses was just plain unwilling. I don't want to. That's when God got mad. All right, he said, what about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he speaks well. Ooh, he just threw down the gauntlet. You'll see this in a minute. And look, he's on his way to meet you now. He'll be delighted to see you. Talk to him and put the words in his mouth. I'll be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesperson to the people. He will be your mouthpiece, and you will stand in the place of God for him, telling him what to say. And take your shepherd's staff with you and use it to perform the miraculous signs that I have shown you. Right here. Where's Moses?
Bush.
He's at the bush on top of Mount Sinai.
Mhm.
Where has he been for the past 40 years?
Wilderness,
In the wilderness. Where is his brother Aaron?
in Egypt.
In Egypt. But God knew that Moses was going to do all this mess. And so God already put it in Aaron's heart. Come to Mount Sinai. I'm going to need you here.
First time ever.
First time ever. And so at this point, God tells Moses, all right, I knew you were going to do this. So I called your brother Aaron. He's here. He's the one that's going to do the talking for you because he speaks better than you do, which is a lie. Because the only thing that I didn't mean that.
No,
I didn't mean that. But he's doing it for a reason.
yeah.
Because he knows that Moses is accomplished in language. He knows that he is super smart. And he says, hey, your brother, the Hebrew, the slave, who's just been busting rocks for the past 40 years,
Mhm.
he speaks really well, better than you. So I'm going to let him do the talking, but I'm going to tell you what to say. And you just convey that information to Aaron. Because I'm not talking to Aaron. I didn't choose Aaron. I chose you. So now he's created this triangle here, and it's a mess. Aaron the Levite. So at this point, we see God's permissive will. God's perfect will is what he laid out to Moses. Answer my call, do what I say, everything will go smooth, the end.
Mhm.
But Moses didn't want to do that. He wanted to do it the hard way.
You don't want to do it at all.
Right. So his permissive will now allows Aaron to be Moses's mouthpiece. This is not God giving in to Moses. He actually tried to goad Moses into accepting by saying that Aaron was a great talker. Moses knew full well that Moses is a better talker than Aaron.
So did that get his little pride going maybe?
It didn't.
Okay.
His fear was greater than his pride.
Better than that. So, yeah.
God chose his words correctly. Aaron was a smooth talker. We'll see that later. But of little content. He had a lot of words to say, but the words weren't worth much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So God would give Moses the words. Moses would then convey those words to Aaron. And we're going to see that Aaron was more of a hindrance than a help. Whenever we see trouble from this point on, guess who causes the trouble? Aaron. So Aaron is going to be a thorn in Moses's side. Now, Charles Spurgeon, I talked about him before, that great hall last week that was full of 6,000 people. Then it was empty because it was the wilderness. Charles Spurgeon had a quote. He said, God grant, if we must have two eyes, that they may both be clear ones. One in the eye of faith, wholly fixed on Christ. The other, the eye of obedience, quickly or equally and wholly fixed on the same objective. So what he's saying here is that we need to have both the lead of Christ and the faith to follow Christ in order to accomplish the goals that God has set before us. John 14:15, really, really simple. Jesus says, if you love me, obey my commandments. Don't give me excuses. I already know what your questions are going to be. I'm going to answer them for you. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you where to go. All you have to do is
Obey.
obey. Okay? So music went super long,
Yeah, so you finished.
so I finished. So next week, we're going to hit the next step of the journey. And we go all the way back.
The typo on Charles Spurgeon should be 1892.
Oh, okay.
It is a long time.
Sorry.
So you
I don't know if you were giving it life to death deal or if that was
1992.
something else about his years.
All right, everybody online. Now that I got called out, I will fix this for next time. See you next time.
How many were online?
I can't see.
Oh.
So it's been God brought Aaron to Moses,